great-great-grandma left the Dakota Territory in 1875, and she came west on the Oregon Trail in a covered wagon when she was 11 years old. And they called her Jenny. May 19th, 1875. We left our home in Civil Bend, Union County, Dakota Territory at 9 o'clock in the morning, en route to Oregon. Our friends and neighbors accompanied us to the Missouri River, where we parted from them amid tears and good wishes and went on board the ferry boat to cross the river, leaving my dear parents and oldest son behind. As the boat bore us from them across the muddy waters, we could see those left on the shore waving us adieu as long as we could see them. The river being perfectly calm, we passed over in safety but got wet in going. Must have been a very hard, difficult, dirty, dusty trip. In the winter it must have been horrible, terribly cold, and they traveled by horses, which was very slow. It took them 5 months to reach their destination. The hardest thing would be to go off and leave all of your family and come to an unknown land. The breakdowns, the covered wagons break down, and to feed the horses, food for the people. In the diary, she shares of the encounters with Indians. Many of the Indians were friendly and helped them, or they would help the Indians in exchange. But when the Indians arrived upon the scene, they didn't know if they were friendly or enemy or what kind of Indians they were. They were sometimes very afraid of the Indians. October 19th. Hez got a piece of land back in the timber. This is home for the present. Oh, how gloomy. This ends our trip across the plains in 1875. They came to Moscow in 1876. Hez came to Moscow and went into business with Mr. Pomeroy in the cabinet shop. Then the people started up an account of the Indian scare. Hez stayed with the shop, said he would not run until he saw something to run from. Then in the meantime, we arrived on October 26, 1877. We took a homestead on the southwest of Tomer Butte. The girls went to school, Jenny and Mary to the Crowley School, and it was then, as it was then called. The Indians had a campground just below our house. They are very nice. When the Indians were in camp and we missed the youngest girl, May, we would find her at an Indian camp. We were on the farm 2 years. Hez bought some lots south of the courthouse and built a home there. And now we are settled and hope to stay. And she lived here, raised a family, and died in Moscow. She was a delightful, small woman. It was always fun to go to her house. And of all the grandchildren, I was her favorite, so she was very special to me. And we always thought she made the best apple pie in the whole world. And she had a wood stove to cook on and no recipe, but it was yummy. She was a fascinating person. She would take her rifle and go deer hunting in the backcountry of Pierce. She was quite an outdoors lady. She would get her elk and deer every year, and then she would can it in jars. And we'd go into her walk-in pantry and there'd be jars and jars of canned meat, and of course vegetables and fruit. And I still remember her big black teddy bear sitting in a high chair in her living room, and I still have that today. And she was a remarkable woman. It was hard to believe that she even rode an ostrich. She was quite a person. She loved growing flowers, and I still can remember her beautiful tall hollyhocks alongside her sidewalk of her house. She was such a special great-grandma to me. In her house, which is still standing today at 423 South Asbury. Because my great-grandma came to Moscow, Idaho, her son married my grandma, and so my parents settled here and raised myself and 3 younger brothers. There were 4 of us children in the family, and I had 3 younger brothers. My youngest brother died at 6 months in my mother's arms. My second brother was 20 years old and was killed in a car wreck by Idler's Rest in 1963. I have 1 living brother in Spokane, Washington. My dad was a common laborer to earn money for our family. We had a car and there was no heater or air conditioner. It was just a plain car, and in the wintertime, us 3 kids would sit in the back seat with a blanket over our legs to keep warm. In the winter, when there was no work for my dad, he would come to town and shovel snow off of roofs. And in those days, if you wanted to eat, you had to work. There was no food stamps, welfare, no assistance of any kind. We raised chickens, and it was always fun to go and put your hand underneath the warm chicken and gather the eggs. And then occasionally we would kill the chicken to eat fried chicken for dinner. And that was always interesting because my mother would chop their heads off and they would jump around the house with no heat except a wood stove. In the wintertime it'd get very cold. And in the mornings we'd jump out of bed and we'd dress in the kitchen, standing in front of the oven door open. And to take baths, we had to pump the water outside, heat it on the wood stove, and put it into a little round tub. And I loved homemade ice cream, and to do that, we would get ice from the creek or else go to the creamery and get a big block of ice. And my job was to stand on top of the freezer, and it was delicious. I was always Daddy's girl, and he was very special to me. And when I was 15 years old, he drowned in Chocolate Lake. And my mother passed away in 2001, 86 years old. I now live in Eugene, Oregon, which is very close to Cottage Grove, to where my great-grandmother settled. And I thank her for all the history and all the things I've learned from her. She's buried here in the Moscow Cemetery. And my grandchildren all have a copy of her diary as the history's passed down through the generations. To reach Cottage Grove, California. Anything that she could possess. That's not right. We lived in the country. Vine apple, pine maple.